Here, Kirsten, and while we're showing those pictures, I want to bring in Josh Frydenberg, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, who's joined me here. Josh Frydenberg, did you get to hear anything of Mr. Obama's speech, or have you read any of the reports from it?
Yeah, Tony, I've just seen some brief media reports. We had a big business lunch with leaders like Gail Kelly and Mike Smith and others with the Queensland government earlier today. But certainly it was an important speech. He had a lot to talk about in terms of security, climate change, trade and others.
I want to ask you particularly about climate change, because a lot of people are saying there were very pointed remarks there to Australia. You were aware of some of those remarks?
Look, I don't think we should be trying to drive a wedge here, Tony, between Australia and the United States. It has to be pointed out that we have had the same target as the United States for reducing our emissions between 2000 and 2020. Now, the Americans have obviously made an announcement with China, and that's appropriate because those two countries are together 40% of the world's emissions. But we have said we'll come up with our targets next year, and let's do that in the lead up to the Paris meeting, which is the appropriate forum for the discussion of these issues.
All right. Now, just a couple of the remarks he made. He said he wanted Australia to step up. Now, surely that is not code for anything. That means Australia, can you do a little bit better? Do you think Australia may, or Tony Abbott may be listening to this?
Well, it's funny you say that, because we've just passed through the Senate, as you know, the Direct Action Plan, which is more than $2.5 billion for specific measures. In America, you've seen congressional results where the Republicans stormed the Congress, effectively getting the best result in the House since 1928, nearly doubling the number of Democrat governors and getting at least 7 Senate spots. And so you're not going to see an emissions trading scheme or a carbon tax in the United States at a national level. What you're going to see is direct action type policies, and we're actually doing that.
All right, I want to run another quote past you. Historically, you said we're not energy efficient, and Australia had to speak up. We produce a lot of carbon. Now, with these sort of remarks that are made by the US President in a forum like this, Josh Frydenberg, it's going to wind up the pressure on the coalition, is it not, to do more?
Look, we're very comfortable with what we are doing, and we'll continue to do more. But the point is, Australia and the United States are both coal producers, and I think Barack Obama is very much conscious of that. But we're also a gas producer, and Australia will become the largest gas producer in the world in just a few years' time. Now, gas is a cleaner form of energy than coal. The world's got to welcome that, and Australia's going to be well positioned to export its gas, which is a cleaner form of energy.
All right. Just a couple of other things. He said everyone has a responsibility. Are you confident that the policies that you have in train will see you through to Paris next year? But what about post-Paris?
Well, Tony, this is where Greg Hunt and the Prime Minister and the Cabinet will come together to try to work out what are appropriate targets. But you're right, we need an action plan going forward, and we will have one consistent with our previous statements on this issue.
All right. Well, Josh Frydenberg, many thanks for taking this time to join in again with this debate.
Great to be with you, Tony.
All right, thanks. Josh Frydenberg, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Let's go back to these. We've got Narendra Modi there talking to the Prime Minister, both centre-right leaders, Josh Frydenberg. You can actually chime into there if you like, because these men have got quite a bit in common, and the trade between India and Australia is minimal, really, when you look at it in world terms.
Well, you're right. It's a fraction. I think it's a tenth of the trade that we have, for example, with China.
Exactly.
And when you consider that both countries are around the same size of population, we could be doing a lot more with India.
A lot of upside on the Indian relationship.
The Prime Minister took a big delegation to India earlier this year, and I'm sure he'll go there again soon.
Yeah, I think the trade with India is something like 15 billion, and I think it's 12.3 as a give and a take. This is Tony Abbott well. This is a huge moment for him, isn't it?
And for Australia, it has to be said. I mean, we've hosted big meetings before, like APEC, but this is the biggest meeting of its kind, because not just the 20 world leaders, but also the leaders of the international organisations.
Well, Shinzo Abe wants to sell you submarines, and there he is. I mean,
and we want to sell him beef and gas and many other things too.
So that's a good two-way relationship.
Very good relationship. I actually had the benefit of going with the Prime Minister to Japan earlier this year.
Now here's someone we know very well. He hasn't got any cricket pads on. He wouldn't dare come up against the Prime Minister with cricket. But David Cameron and Tony Abbott, have they got a good relationship?
I think you saw a very warm relationship yesterday in Canberra, and I think David Cameron delivered a very important speech. I mean, his speech about tackling the extremist narrative was very important, I thought.
All right, Stephen Harper. These are
Brothers
old,
in arms.
These are old mates, really. And ideologically, they're quite close, are they?
I think they're very close, and certainly Canada and Australia are working closely together on a number of areas, and I think that's a relationship will continue to grow.
Angela Merkel was spotted at a pub in Brisbane yesterday, according to my cameraman.
Drinking an Australian or German beer, Tony?
I don't know. Well, I imagine it would be an Australian beer. There was a reference to beer today in the President Obama speech. He was saying 4X. So that would be an absolute gimme for a bloody executive, wouldn't it? I mean, it's amazing. The Saudi Arabia king there speaking.
Well, they had a bilateral earlier today.
They did, didn't they?
That's important too.
Do you know what was discussed there?
I'm sure issues around energy were discussed, and also just how we can work together in the Middle East, because, as you know, Saudi Arabia is very concerned, Tony, about the spread of ISIL and ISIS and the breakdown of law and order in both Iraq and Syria.
Well, the Crown Prince certainly looks happy to be at the G20, and
he's a great friend of Australia.
Now, here is Australia's greatest friend, according to the Prime Minister. Are we seeing a tweaking of foreign policy here at the G20? Because the Prime Minister said that Indonesia was our single greatest friend or neighbour.
I think the Prime Minister and Joko Widodo have started off very well. In fact, the Prime Minister, like his predecessor, John Howard, who went to SBY's inauguration,
yes,
went to Joko Widodo's inauguration. And look, a country of 250 million people with 5% plus growth, a key partner for Australia strategically, politically and economically.
Yes, well, and here is, Xi Jinping he's kept a low profile here as far as the media goes. I mean, but you're talking about the next great superpower there.
Well, he's shown himself to be a reformist leader, tackling corruption in his own country, just hosted APEC, and we're looking forward to his address to Parliament next week, and hopefully a very good announcement around an FTA.
Yes. It's a curious thing, this G20.
Well, I think President Park, who we're just seeing now, she's got a wonderful story, because, you know, her first visit overseas was to Australia as a 12-year-old when she accompanied her father, who was then the president of Korea.
That's right. She's got a political lineage.
And I was there with the Prime Minister in Korea earlier this year when he presented her with a photo of her and her father planting a tree here in Australia.
Oh, that's marvellous, isn't it, really? That's terrific. Terrific story. So the Prime Minister, at the end of all this meet and greet, will have a few remarks.
Look, he's said some remarks earlier this morning.
Yep.
No doubt there'll be some more public remarks throughout the course of the weekend. Francois Hollande, who's making an important visit. In fact, the first French president, sitting French president, to visit Australia, apparently.
Well, that's a good little factoid.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not just the French. There hasn't been an Italian Prime Minister, and there hasn't been a sitting Brazilian president who's visited Australia either.
Ah, okay. Well, there's the man of the moment. This is the money shot, and we don't have any voiceover on this. Perhaps you could tell me what the Prime Minister's perhaps saying to him.
Obviously, meeting with talking to Vladimir Putin, they had a very firm conversation. Look, it's smiles, but it's also very serious. And you know, we've not been too pleased with how the Russians have handled events after the downing of MH17.
No, and that's
he's the Brazilian leader.
Now, Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff, and
just re-elected.
But of course, she's got some troubles at home, because there's been huge corruption cases uncovered in the last 24 hours. It's tough for leaders when they're here, because they've got so much going on domestically as well.
Well, you remember that famous statement by Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, who said all politics is local, Tony. Well, so you can go to these world meetings, but you've also got your local politics to contend with.
Those pesky voters.
Jacob Zuma. Here is the South African leader, I think.
And Africa generally is being represented here too, isn't it, on the sidelines?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think the Senegalese,
they're the representatives for the rest of Africa.
And others. So, look, he is a leader of an important country, South Africa, which has transitioned well after the Mandela reign.
Yes, and thank goodness everyone drew a breath of relief when that occurred. Now, I don't recognise this chap. I've never seen him before.
He's got a good three-pointer, I can tell you that.
He had He
Oh,
had
wait,
the
just-
audience at the university in his hand today. There was some calls about, how much substance there was in the speech.
Oh, here he is.
It
He's
was
the last.
certainly
He's
entertaining.
the last handshake. So that's a big honour given to the leader of the free world.
Now, Kirsten, you're in our Sydney studio. We now pack up, I think, all of these photographers and the like, and we move on to a different venue. And it's Welcome Country, I think, is next, Kirsten.
Any idea, Tony, just how long that will be from now?
Look, your guess is as good as mine, but things have been running reasonably to schedule, well, albeit about 15 minutes behind, and given the size of this operation, I think